election season warms up and minimum income guarantee tries to bring the focus back to the basics of this election. Who better than India's Minister of Civil Aviation State, Mr. Jayant Sinha, joining us right here on ET now to defend his government going into elections, to talk about the minimum income guarantee and to also talk about India's economic growth trajectory right now. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Sinha. And I know you tour two worlds in some sense, New Delhi and you understand high street finance and your rural constituency of Hazaribagh. We are in the middle of election season, so it's only fair that I begin talking to you about elections. What are elections 2019 going to be about? One thought it was going to be about the economy, then Pulwama and Balakot happened, the attention shifted to national security. It seems to be getting back to the basics with jobs and things like that once again in focus. What will voters vote for in 2019?
I think first and foremost, voters are going to vote for the leadership of the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji. That's very, very clear. Everywhere you go, the support, the enthusiasm, the excitement for the Prime Minister is extraordinary. But it is because the Honorable Prime Minister has delivered on three very important aspects of all of our lives. First, of course, national security. It's very important for the government to ensure that the country is secure, well protected, and we have certainly done that through a variety of actions, whether it's Uri, whether it is the airstrikes, whether it's what we've done in terms of the satellite missile that we launched. All of those give people confidence that the country is in safe hands. Second, of course, is development. What we've done in development, the growth in the economy, the ease of doing business improvements, all of those have been extraordinary. And third is good government. We have eliminated corruption. We've eliminated the leakages that were endemic to this economy. We've eliminated tax fraud and tax avoidance. We've made sure people are paying their taxes honestly, and that's again through a series of actions. So whether it is security, whether it's development, whether it's good governance, people are really, really excited about going to vote and vote for the BJP.
But Mr. Sinha, I'm going to ask you a bit of an uncomfortable question now. Is the BJP consciously trying to make national security a poll agenda and election agenda? Because truth be told, national security should be left to the armed forces. It should not be politicized. But you are constantly taking political credit for this, and which is why one wonders, are you risking the issue being politicized? Should you be talking about this in the election at all?
National security is a vital and important issue for the people of this country. We live in a dangerous neighborhood, Supriya. We are facing a terrorist threat. Terrorists have come into our cities, they have come into our rural areas as well, and they have fomented death and destruction. It's very important for people to feel secure, to feel that the nation's borders are protected and that the integrity of this nation will never ever be compromised. So it is a live and important issue for our people, and we've obviously addressed that, and that's why the benefits are coming to us.
Let's talk about poll promises, and this is of course in the headline domain ever since this was spoken about. I am going to shift the discussion to minimum income guarantee scheme, and at least, you know, the one that's been promised by the Congress party, and one gets a sense when you speak to a lot of people that this has shifted the election narrative once again. And I think as far as your position is concerned, and I really mean your party's position, you're not being able to decide, are you for it or against it? You know, do you call it a bluff or do you not call it a bluff? Do you call it fiscally reckless or do you not call it fiscally reckless? Because the reality is that a lot of people believe that the opposition is simply because your 6,000 on the PM Kisan Samman pales in comparison to the 72,000 that the Congress is offering every year. So first up, the minimum income guarantee scheme or Nyaya Yojana of the Congress, what is your position on that? Are you for it or are you against it?
Our position is very clear. We are for eliminating poverty. We are for eradicating poverty. We are for ensuring that everybody leads a dignified life in our country. And we as a government have done more to eliminate poverty at a structural level than any government has done previously. What are the sources of poverty? The sources of poverty are agricultural volatility. For example, because of failed monsoon, we've got the Fasal Bima Yojana. What is the source of poverty? Which is that, you know, you don't get a good support price for your agricultural produce. We brought in the MSP 1.5 time formula. What is the source of poverty? Which is, for example, a medical incident that drags you back into poverty. We've got in the Ayushman Bharat scheme so that everybody who's poor has 5 lakh guaranteed. So we've eliminated the sources of poverty. And then on top of that, we provided many, many resources for people to come out of poverty. Now, if you look at the total amount of money that's simply from direct benefit transfer is going to the poor. That already amounts to over 5 lakh crores and over 1 lakh per month, per year for these poor households. Over 1 lakh a year already. So it's already beyond the 72,000 that the Congress is speaking about. And it's through a series of well-targeted, well-defined programs with no leakage. Frankly, the Nyaya Yojana, the way the Congress has positioned it, is neither affordable nor implementable.
You know, I'm going to discuss the affordability and the fiscal space for this in just a bit, because we've been speaking to a lot of prominent economists, some of you who know very well, in just a minute from now. But the fact is that a lot of what you've done, or a lot of what this scheme promises hinges upon poverty, and in India, where a lot of people in the studio don't have exposure to. A lot of people who watch English business news channels have no idea about. And which is why I think the only question that I want to ask somebody who straddles both worlds in some sense is that, do you concede that there is a section of India that needs this additional income support, that is in need for this additional income support? Are you going to concede that because you have an exposure to rural India and Hazaribagh? You understand what poverty is?
Yes, of course, and we are providing that income support, whether it is through the minimum support price guarantee of 1.5 times their input costs, whether it is through the Mudra Loan Yojana, where we are saying you have all these other ways, whether it is to keep goats, whether it is to keep hens, whether it is to keep cows, whether it is to get into horticulture. We are providing that through Mudra Loan. You're doing that through Soil Health Card, Fasal Bima. So we are providing tremendous amount of income support for the agricultural sector. Plus, we are increasing many, many employment opportunities in the rural economy as well. So of course we are providing all of that, but we are doing that through jobs, we are doing that through resources, we are doing that by giving dignity to people, and we are doing it through well-targeted schemes and promises. What really baffles me, Supriya, what really baffles me about the Nyaya Yojana is how it could have been put together by a political party that has ruled India for so many years, and by well-reputed economists, because it is, as I said, neither affordable nor implementable. Affordable, we know the costs. It's going to be, roughly, let's say, 2% of GDP. It'll take our fiscal deficit from 8 or 9% general government deficit to 11%, which is already too high. We're trying to bring down the general government deficit.
But I've actually been speaking to a lot of those prominent economists, and I spoke to Raghuram Rajan, the former RBI governor. I spoke to Y.V. Reddy, the former RBI governor as well, and they all believe that this is fiscally doable, and this is fiscally doable if some of the existing schemes can be waned away. So, and I also think the 2% GDP calculation is a simplistic calculation. You're simply taking 72,000, multiplying it by 5 and saying 2% of the GDP. It is going to be the differential. So the figure is going to be a lot less than the 3.6 lakh crore that is being quoted right now. And which is why I think the question is that an additional amount of money in the hands of the people. You don't think that's warranted? Some amount of direct money, direct cash into the pockets of people? Is that what you're saying?
We've already done that through the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana, and you've
done that only for farmers with holdings of less than 5 acres.
That's right. So the people whom we can identify cleanly and efficiently, and whom we can transfer money through the direct benefit transfer. But there are two very flawed assumptions, that people are throwing around. One very flawed assumption is that today's existing programs will be taken away, and then this will be put in its place. That is not going to happen politically. It's just not going to happen, because you can't go to people and say, I'm going to take away your gas cylinders, I'm going to take away your houses, I'm going to take away, the food distribution scheme that you have. It just doesn't work that way. Let me tell you, no politician can go and ask for votes.
And that's a challenge in India. You can't weigh off
completely flawed. It's a completely flawed, unworkable assumption made by armchair economists and people who have no understanding of grassroots reality. So let's ignore that flawed assumption. Now let's come to the other flawed assumption, which is that it will be staged over a long period of time. If it's going to be staged over a long period of time, then where is the dhamaka that was talked about? If it's staged over a long period of time, then frankly it will be diluted, it will not have impact. We are in a federal structure, very difficult to implement it as a state plus center program. We are already seeing the problems with that with Kisan Yojana, Ayushman Bharat Yojana, where states are not supporting the center. So as I said, it just has these very flawed assumptions. And let's come to the implementation issue. Targeting is a huge problem, Supriya, at the grassroots level. I deal with it every day when I go into villages and I talk to people. We wanted to get the food distribution scheme working. We've got ration cards in front of people, but to be able to identify cleanly who deserves a ration card and who doesn't is a very difficult task in a village. How are you going to identify the 20% of the people who deserve it and not do it?
But can difficulty dissuade a policy?
Some policies are better than others. This is clearly one of the worst policies you can conceive of. There are other much better policies like the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana.
But again, that's a very targeted, just farmers.
But that's what works, Supriya. That's what makes it implementable. That's when you have a program that's designed by people who understand grassroots reality, who understand what government's systems can do and cannot do, who have long years of administrative experience. We need administrators and politicians to run the country, not economists. Economists have failed all around the world. Let's be clear.
Okay, I don't think the economists in this case are running the program. It's being the manifesto committee headed by a former finance minister.
We had an economist running the country for a long time.
I don't think we did too badly in his tenure, at least not economically. We are talking about politics here. We are not talking about, we are talking about economy here and not politics really. And which is why, what makes me wonder is that why is it that the BJP is opposing this tooth and nail now, when actually the first balloon on minimum income or the universal basic income was first floated by Arvind Subramanian in your tenure as your chief economic advisor? Why is it that the BJP did not, cry foul then, did not call a riot then, and suddenly the BJP seems to be up and about opposing this move?
We are committed to ending poverty. On May 20th, 2014, the Honorable Prime Minister in his speech in the Central Hall of Parliament said, "ये गरीबों की सरकार है और ये गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है." So we have always focused on making sure that people get the chances, the opportunities and the support to get out of poverty, and we have fully implemented that agenda. But it's not an either or, Supriya. We've provided social security, we've provided poverty alleviation, poverty elimination, and at the same time we've created enormous opportunity for those who can avail themselves of those opportunities. So in an economy you have to provide social security, which we've done better than any government has ever done in history, and at the same time ease of doing business going down from 142 to 77, investment pouring in, reform after reform after reform. We've really modernized and reformed the economy as well. It's not an either or. You have to do both. After all, if you're not pro-market, if you're not creating the wealth, if you're not creating the opportunity, how are you going to eliminate?
Where will the distribution happen?
Where are you going to eliminate poverty?
So
let's not set up that false trade-off. Now the question is not how do you spur the economy forward? How do you eliminate poverty? All of that, of course, we want to do. The question is, which are the best policies to do that? We know that growth is important. We know that, support and opportunity is important. Question is how? And that's why we are opposing Nyay, because Nyay is just unworkable. And anybody who has any understanding of India's financial, administrative and social realities knows it's not going to work.
So let me ask you a very candid question. If it was workable and if it wasn't going to threaten India's fiscal trajectory, so to say, would you support Nyay?
I think there are far better ways to do it. I think targeting is a huge problem at the grassroots level, Supriya. And to just arbitrarily say in an impulsive way that we are going to target 20%, how do you define 20%? And what about the 20.001% person? Is he not going to get any benefits? So we can't exclude people in that hard and fast way. There have to be much better programs. We have to think it through. We've got some very, very good programs. Ayushman Bharat, obviously the Ujjwala scheme, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, obviously the Kisan Yojana. All of these are already in place. We've put a tremendous amount of money and resources into it, and we're doing it more efficiently with less leakage than any government has done.
Can I ask you a little bit of a cheeky question? Do you believe the voters are going to buy into the Nyay scheme?
That the elections will tell, and of course, as somebody who faces voters every day,
yes,
I can tell you the package that we are offering in terms of, as I said earlier, national security, development, good government versus this Mahamilavat Gadbandhan.
But if it wasn't,
I just don't see that that's something that voters are excited about.
All I'm saying is that if Nyay was going to be so easily dismissive, then we wouldn't have a lot of your people, including the Prime Minister, come out in the open and oppose it. That's my only contention, which is why I asked you. Okay, I have two questions, and this is not a partisan political question. This is a bigger picture question, really. As somebody who, again, straddles both worlds, you look at the Kisan Samman, the PM Kisan Samman, or you look at Nyay. Is there a tacit acceptance on the part of our political class that economic growth is not going to be enough to lift people out of poverty, and which is why some amount of support, some amount of doles are required? Is there a tacit acceptance that growth alone could not be perhaps the tide that will lift the boat?
Supriya, the widespread consensus around the world is that good policy has to work on both dimensions. It has to provide social security. It has to provide a certain level of dignified living for everyone. That's all of us is responsibility. We all have to ensure that we can provide that certain level threshold of support and social security on the one hand, and on the other hand, we do what we can to spur the economy forward, create opportunity, and provide all the incentives for growth and investment. So it's not an either or. Let's not confuse ourselves. That's very simplistic and simple-minded to say that it's one or the other. That's a very trivial level of debating the issue. The fact is, we have to do both, and the question is, how do we do both? How do we design the policies so that we have the necessary resources from, the formal, high-functioning, wealth-creating side of the economy to be able to pay for social security? That's a challenge that every economy around the world is dealing with right now.
The reason why I asked you that question is that if you look at what the Congress is now offering, or what the BJP offered in 2014, the sense that one gets is, it's a case of once bitten, twice shy. The BJP offered the moon on jobs, could not deliver. The Congress wants to steer clear of that. And now nobody is really talking about jobs in a big way. People are talking about whether it's Kisan Samman or whether it's Nyay. You are talking about putting money in the hands of people directly. Is it also a tacit acceptance that the kind of job creation that India needs, we will be the youngest nation by 2030, people have to be gainfully employed, the kind of job creation that's required will perhaps not happen?
Supriya, you're once again setting up a false trade-off. It's not social security or jobs. It's jobs and social security. We are doing both, and we are delivering on both dimensions, and we are doing it brilliantly well. That's why the economy is growing as quickly as it is.
Cross to macroeconomy, and in fact more than macroeconomy, macroeconomic data. Because unfortunately right now in India, there is a very, very polarized debate happening with the economist on one side and the CAs on the other on India's economic data, on the credibility of this economic data. Doubts are being raised, questions are being raised. It's actually become a very polarized, name-calling, mudslinging, sort of a match right now. And which is why the question is that, I actually have two questions there. I did not know that CAs could be reading the GDP series, and they were trained to do so. And the second question that I have for you largely is on the point that economic decision-making happens on the basis of this macroeconomic data. And one wonders if that, and as a policymaker, are you concerned that that economic decision-making could be getting compromised and questioned?
Supriya, let me just tell you that the GDP accounting is an accounting effort. It's not an economic effort necessarily. You have to go through, look at all the sectors of the economy. You have to look at accounting statistics. You have to look at investment. So I think the CAs who are obviously very well versed in accounting and very well understand how to audit economic statistics have as much of a say in this matter as do the economists. And that's wonderful that we are having this debate, because it has to be totally transparent. And if the GDP numbers are out there, of course they're out there because not just the government of India through the Central Statistical Organization, but every rating agency and every global economic agency, whether it's the IMF, the World Bank, all of them also come out with their statistics. So the conversation and the debate on this is being had in a very transparent way. There are experts of all types, whether they are accountants, whether they are economists, who are providing their opinions, and ultimately, we will come to a consensus. Science is not done overnight, Supriya. And of course, the economy is going through major structural changes as well. So let the debate happen, let everybody go through it, let people pour over the data, and then we will settle on a consensus.
I just hope the debate wasn't done with political glasses on, and especially the statement issued by CAs, I thought was deeply steeped into the politics of the day, talking about
Supriya, as the Honorable Finance Minister pointed out in his blog, the people who question the data themselves have been known to take very political positions, and there is a group of them that are constantly signing these petitions and going on, and everything is politicized in our world today.
Should it be?
No, I don't think the IMF and the World Bank are politicized. I think people in India who are posturing as economists, frankly, are politicians in disguise, and so they should come forward and say, we are politicians, we have a political point of view, and they will be treated as such. But don't wear the mantle of academia and posture with that and present yourself as a neutral objective.
I just think 108 of them, and not just from India but around the world, can't be dismissed as just political posturing.
Economists are well known for being extremely ideological and extremely
I agree with you. I agree that economists
biased in some of their views, and therefore I do not say just because they're an economist, they are
they can't be more
free of ideological bias.
Absolutely, they
can't be free of ideological bias.
I'm sure
they have their clear ideological bias.
They have ideological bias.
Science is not done overnight. I'm a scientist. I'm an engineer by training. Okay, I know how science works. Anybody who has an opinion on things like demonetization is speaking through their hat, because none of that can be worked out. Today itself, there was a very interesting article that talked about down beta in the Indian stock market, and which said very clearly that the financialization of assets post demonetization has resulted in a down beta that is far lower than it used to be. Volatility in the markets come down, which brings down the cost of capital. Has that been factored into their scientific analysis so far?
I think, just as a well-wisher, I'll tell you, don't touch upon the word demonetization so close to elections. But you know, while this debate is on, and while this debate is actually hotting up, can the government afford to be just a mute spectator and let this debate carry on? I mean, I know it's science doesn't develop overnight, like you say, but you know, this debate actually questions and erodes trust and confidence and credibility in our data, and which is why, has the time not come for the government to look at setting up of an independent commission, an independent body that could look into, the data, the processes, the methodology being involved, perhaps rope in best experts from all walks of life, because this is a suggestion that has come from multiple very well-meaning people.
Supriya, the code of conduct is in place. I can't speak about any policy matters.
You know, I agree with you that interpretation of data can perhaps be done with tinted glasses. Interpretation of data can be a function of your political biases, but the release of data can't be, and which is why it worries me for a certain extent that why do we not have the crime data? Why do we not have the suicide data, the farmer suicide data? Why do we not have the jobs data where people have had to quit the NSSO? Does that not worry you, and does that not hamper policy making? When you don't have that crucial data, what are you basing policies on?
I think that is the question you have to ask each of the agencies concerned. Certainly, you know, I represent one ministry which doesn't have anything to do with those agencies. True. And I think in each case there is probably a different explanation for it. But obviously any data that is put out officially has to be absolutely rock solid. It has to be scientifically reliable, in the sense that anybody going in with that data should come to the same conclusions. And so those are important filters and tests that have to be in place.
I just wish data was being presented, but I have a question to ask of you. And you had, you somebody who is known to be a moderate, so to say. You are happily taking questions where I'm criticizing you, and I laud you for that, because not many in your party are as welcoming. Suddenly, it seems that there is this atmosphere, there is this narrative where questioning the central government or criticizing the union government is anti-national. And I'm not just talking about journalists or opinion makers or thought leaders or what they call the liberals. I'm talking about state governments. I mean, you know, if you are going to assert your right, if you are going to question, I mean, today questioning the union government, you are going to be labeled pro-Pakistan, you're going to be labeled anti-national. What sort of political discourse are we looking at?
Supriya, the beauty of our democracy, the beauty of all democracies is a diversity of opinion and freedom of expression. So certainly you're welcome to express your opinions. Others are welcome to express their opinions, and however disagreeable their opinions might be, whether for or against, they have a right to express it. And that is an oath I have sworn to the Constitution to protect that right. And of course, people should be free to express those opinions.
Why do we not see the senior leadership in your party crack down on some of the motor mouths, crack down on people who say filth and get away with it? And they do it repeatedly, which is why one is tempted to believe that they were never pulled up in the first place. I mean, why has that been allowed to continue? And because, you know, it's only fair that I don't name people because they're not there to defend themselves, but the kind of filth that people say and get away with.
We are a very disciplined party, and we are very clear about what we should be engaging in terms of political discourse and what we should not be, and that is very clear to all people in the party.
You know, as somebody who heads civil aviation, I can't not ask you a question there. I understand we are bound by the model code of conduct and you can't be talking policy and rescue plans there, but some torment in the airline industry as well. I am no fan of Vijay Mallya. I do believe he should be here. He should face the law. He should pay up every penny that he owes to India's banks. But there is something that he has said which has kind of fueled another debate, and he says that Jet was allowed, in fact, Kingfisher was allowed to perish consciously by policymakers, and Jet was very actively rescued. And of course, then he goes on to point out how his letters to the Prime Minister were seen as crony capitalism, but Naresh Goyal's letters were heeded to the government, and the banks all got together to save Jet Airways. How would you respond, and what would your defense to that argument and to that allegation really be?
Supriya, I think those are all policy matters that we really can't get into, because clearly the way the policy framework has operated in our government is very different from the way the policy framework operated in the UPA government, and the results are clear in front of everyone. We operate, as we have said many times before, at the industry level, not at the player level. We set up the policy framework, and then the various parties operate within the policy framework and come to conclusions and resolutions accordingly.
Is the crisis at Jet Airways truly behind us?
Of course, we will have to see. It depends a great deal on exactly how the financial resources come in.
And are you confident of finding a buyer by, I mean, like the lenders have said, by May?
Well, obviously the banks are responsible for the process, so it's really a question you need to ask them.
And I think anything beyond that is going to be breaching model code of conduct, and so I won't. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for always being candid and speaking to us right here in the TV.